Open access to scientific publications has been discussed for 20 years now. Nevertheless, people still seem to have reservations about it. Time for a myth check.
Open access just doesn't have the same quality as publishing with traditional publishers.
Current studies cannot find any differences in the quality between open access and non-open access publications. This is only logical, because reputable open access journals conduct quality checks in the form of peer review, just like conventional journals. The decisive factor is not the characteristic of open access itself, but rather the integrity of a journal. Unfortunately, there are also fraudulent, so-called predatory journals that publish everything for money and pretend to have quality control. To make sure that certain quality standards are met, there are various services, for example the DOAJ and Think Check Submit. In addition, there are metrics that attempt to quantitatively describe the importance of a work or a journal, such as the journal impact factor. Despite the justified criticism of these metrics, many open access journals now have a high impact factor and a corresponding reputation.
Open access is far too expensive. I can't afford it anyway.
It is true that the well-known article processing charges can amount up to several thousand euros. But this so-called author-pays business model is not synonymous with open access. There are many journals that finance themselves in other ways. If authors have to bear costs, these are usually paid by the associated institution or a funding organization. Is open access then expensive for the institutions? Access to scientific literature is indeed expensive. However, this also applies to conventional subscriptions to publishers, which on the one hand are expensive and on the other not accessible for the public. In general, journals that are run by academics themselves and are non-profit are cheaper than journals published by profit-oriented major publishers. And by the way, price is not an indicator of quality.
Open access restricts my freedom to publish.
The decision on where to publish is entirely up to the authors. While not every journal and anthology offers open access as an option, in most cases it is still possible to publish in the journal of choice if a version is self-archived in a repository. There are in fact journals that do not meet the open access criteria of some funders even after negotiations. It is then indeed not possible to publish in these journals. However, this should not be understood as a restriction of freedom of publication, because the funding conditions serve to protect the rights of authors. In open access, authors do not cede their rights to a publisher. As a consequence, the academic system itself retains control. It can define the conditions under which findings can be disseminated and used, instead of making itself dependent on commercial providers.
Open access? For what? This is far too much work.
No matter where and how something is published, it is always important to read the small print carefully before publishing. When we take on new paths, journal selection or funding are always tasks that must be mastered at first. Academic libraries provide support for all the steps involved in publishing. If a work is finally openly accessible, anyone with internet connection can access the research results worldwide. This benefits not only researchers, but also interested people from the field. In short, the effort is worth it.